today in the art studio, we're going to start with a marsh painting. We're going to be using acrylic paint, and we're going to use a 1-inch brush, and we have a very simple sketch on our canvas of the space for the marsh. We have a very simple horizon line set up, and then we have a bank where the marsh is coming up against the water, and we just have really 2 lines that represent where the water is going to be, and the rest is going to be grass. So it's a very simple sketch. But now when we get ready to think about putting the colors in, we're going to use the base of white. So I'm going to use my 1-inch brush and just pick up the white and put it over on my palette. And then I'm going to use the white, and I'm just going to brush it across. With just a couple of brush strokes, I can get the white in very fast. And now we're ready to add other colors in. So I have ultramarine blue that I'll be using in the sky color. I also have some deep red violet that I'll be using. And then I have some alizarin crimson that I'll use as one of the reds. So I'm going to start off with blue. I'm just going to pick up a little bit on the end of my brush, so I don't have much on it at all, because it's going to be a very pale kind of sky area. And since I already have the white in, it's just real easy to come across. As you can see, I'm using just the end of my brush to come in and put a few of the colors of the blue in. And then I'll do the same thing with the violet. I'll put a few, just using the tip of my brush and a very small amount of paint. I can just lay in the purple or the violet color and just use a few little brush strokes that are going right across the middle space where the sky meets the horizon in that area. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the alizarin crimson. I'm just putting just a little bit on my brush. You can hardly see it, but it's enough to show that reddish color, different than the blue and the violet. So we want to make sure we get a little bit of that in. But very simple strokes of just no detail at all. Just moving the paint right across the white that I laid down first. And now we have a sky. So you can play with that as much as you want to, but it's a very simple feeling of just getting those few colors in that make this painting so easy to paint and fun to look at. The next thing that I want to think about is bringing in the earthy, grassy colors to come in. So what I'd like to do is, once again, start with the base of white, and then I'm going to come across and I didn't even have to wash my brush out. It still has some of the blue and purple in it. That's fine. I'm just going to use the white in to set up the place where I can put my colors that I want to paint with first, and that's going to be some yellow with some of the blue in it. So now I'll just take the yellow, move it over to where I have my blue, and you can see I can make some beautiful grassy colors with yellow mixed in with the colors that I used originally for the sky. And you can see how I'm just going to brush those across. I'm really just setting up the space for where I want my grass to come and meet in with the water. So I'm brushing that color, and I'm changing it as I go. Sometimes I'm going to add more yellow ochre. So I picked up some yellow ochre, and I'm bringing that over to the edge just a little bit. These are just simple brush strokes. Now, after we have the yellow ochre, I'm going to begin to add some more of the blue into the yellow to make it greenish. And I'll add that on top and move that over. And as I get over to this side, I'm going to begin to put in a little space that represents some grass that is even further back. So I'm going to use a sap green that I can come in right against the horizon line and beyond a little bit by making that sap green. This allows the viewer to see the grassy, bushy stuff that's further away. So if I begin to add a little bit more of a darker blue in with the sap green, you can see how I can darken that corner a little bit more. Just little, this is, it's a small canvas, and so we're just beginning to pull the colors into this part that you can see in the right hand corner. And I'm just using the end of the brush to bring in some texture now. Remember, I added some blue and sap green into this, and now I'm just using the brush very lightly to build up some texture. So now I have all of those layers of color that you can see in one little small space. So I'm going to start bringing in the browns next. So I have more definition of color coming in, and a few more lines that represent where the grasses are actually growing from. And as I move on over to this side, I'm going to take those same colors and build up a few grasses. And each time I'm just using the fullness of this 1-inch brush to make those grasses. Sometimes I can pull the lines up or down. So I push them into where I want them to start growing from, and then I just use the edge of it just to barely touch the canvas and to get some of those textures of grass to show and be right in front of or overlapping the area where we have our sky put in. So now I have a brighter green coming in right in front of the area that I first made right against the horizon. And now I have a lighter green by adding more of the cadmium yellow. And you can see that if you start in the back against the horizon and you come forward towards the middle of the canvas, you can see I'm adding a few more layers, like almost like rows of grass. And as I come over to the middle, I'm going to leave it lighter. So I want to really show that we have a space in there that has a lighter feel, maybe like the sun is concentrating in this area. So I'm going to add a little more white and a little more yellow, and I'm just touching the canvas with those colors. I didn't pre-mix them on the palette. I just laid them down so that you can see blades of grass almost appearing in that area. And as you can see, as you start coming down, now I can add in other yellows. I'm picking up a little bit of the yellow ochre that I can put in this area. And you can see as I'm using the brush, now I'm beginning to use the end of it just a little bit more. So I'm no longer turning it sideways like this, like I did when I was painting first. But now all the grasses seem to grow right up out of that space. So now it's just a matter of using different colors to make it really fun and interesting. A while ago I used the yellow ochre. Now I'd like to add a little bit of the orange in. So this is just an orange right out of the tube that I can add just so carefully right into a few places in that area. So now that I have that bank sort of built up, I can move and work on the place that's going to anchor the land from the water. And in that particular place now, I want to just add purple to my brush. Remember, I'm not having to wash out my brush hardly at all, because all of these colors are in the same family and go really well together. And I'm wanting a natural look, so you can see that when I added purple to the yellow and green that I already had on my brush, what a nice, beautiful color that makes. It's a grayish color because purple and yellow are complementary colors. And if I mix those together, I get a nice gray that's really good for this painting. And as you can see, once I get that established for where the bank is going to be, you can see how I'm making that in and having a darker area. Then I can have some of the grass growing up from that. I'm almost using my brush underhanded, where I'm just going and I'm using the horizontal line to establish the bank first, and then I'm coming up with the bristle brush and just bringing up some strokes that look like the grass. Okay, now before we can have the grass growing above this bank and on this bank, we need to put our water in. So I'm just going to take my brush and wipe it across just to give me sort of an underpainting of where my grass is going to go. And then I'm going to pick up and start in on my water. So I just brush in the natural colors that are already on my brush, and I'm going to rinse out the greens so that I can get ready to put the water in just where I want it to be. Now when you rinse out your brush, this is a 1-inch brush, so it holds a lot of water. So it's very important that you wipe it off with a paper towel. You can just dab it off so you're not carrying a lot of water. And then you're ready to go for your next color. Now for the color that we're going to use for the water, we're going to start with our base of white. And I'm just going to go in and literally I'm going to use my brush in a back and forth motion. I'm just carrying the water with one simple stroke of white to establish that direction, because that would be the way it needs to go for the flow of the water. This water isn't moving, it's just being very still, and so we wouldn't want to do the strokes in a different direction right now. And I realize you can't see white, but I just picked up enough white so I could go in and wet that space before I pick up my blue that I'm going to pick up next. And now that I pick up blue, I'm going to start laying some of that in. And because the paint, the blue and the white mix and make a beautiful light blue color, it's real easy for me to take my brush and blend the two together while the white is still wet. Now I can use other colors that are reflected down from the sky. Remember, we had blue, but we also had a deep violet color in there, so we'll want to add the violet color too. Picking up just a little bit more blue, and of course, because my blue was next to my green, I picked up a little bit of that, and that really helps to show that the grasses are near this space because they can be reflected in the water. And then we can have some of the purple that we had up above coming in. You can see I picked up just a little bit of the red deep violet color, and I'm adding that in. And now I'm going back and adding just a little bit more blue along the edge of the water. And I'm just going across with the whole width of the brush to lay out where the water is in this marsh. So I'm coming back up to the horizon line, and you can see how I'm moving the water across now. The white's still wet enough that it moves in. And now I'm getting a pretty good coverage of this blue. This is the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to continue to cover a little bit more paint. These are full 1-inch brush strokes of color that I'm adding. There's a nice big brush full of ultramarine blue. I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to add purple. That's that red deep violet color that we've been adding. And that way I want to go ahead and get an underpainting on this water so that I can visually know where the water's flowing as I paint. And now I have that established so I can see where my grasses are and then where my water's going to be. So next I want to begin to get some of the reflective colors from around the water into the water. So as I begin to do that, I'm going to add some of the greens and the yellows back in. So I'm going to pick up white again and load my brush, and I'm going to come in and give myself some of the light color that I need to show where the most light is coming in the painting, and that is around this area where it's actually turning the corner and going back into that space. So I'm lightening that up, and still I'm just using one width of the brush stroke coming right across. And after I do that, while it's still wet, I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick up a little bit of the yellow ochre on my brush, and I'm going to begin to make some of these areas show that there are grasses around it that are being reflected into it. And you can see with this 1-inch bristle brush how easy it is to take the grass and make it look like it is reflecting right there in the water. Now I can use the other colors that I see. Remember, we have some of the gray colors on that side. So I'm going to actually go back and get my purple and mix the yellow in there with it. So I have the greenish gray that I want. Now remember, yellow and purple are complementary colors. So I can get a grayish green color depending on how much purple I add or how much yellow I add. It can definitely change. So that's what I'm going to look at in this area and just put a little bit of that color in that space so we can see some of that grass coming in and being reflected in that area. Now I want some of the purples to come in from the skies. So I'm going to add that in to the area on the side. So I'm just picking up a little bit more purple. I didn't wash my brush, but I just picked up a little bit more of the purple, and now I'm bringing that across because it looks so natural with those, with that gray color being in the brush already. So now I can just pick up and add some of the violet. I put it on my brush, but I didn't put very much at all. Just little pinches, just little smidgens of the color makes such a difference in this area. And then, of course, I'm beginning to go back and work the edges that I'm doing in the middle so that it has a good blend in it. And then I want to establish the edges with the darker color when I go to build the grass in. But I'm going to continue now with the water just a little bit, and I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the blue and make it darker because I know that that's what's going to happen up against that bank, that it's going to be darker. And so we want to be able to put that in, and it'll be right up against the dark grasses that we have in. So just using the simple 1-inch brush, either pulling it vertical or horizontal. And in this case, because we want to build a reflection, they complement each other really. If we can add them both vertically and horizontally, they really give a great reflective feel to this water because we have all the colors coming right down and reflecting off of those grasses. So now I'm going to add a few more of the greens that are going to be over here. I'm going to pull those right into the water, and then once we get the grasses we can come back and add more, but right now we're just setting up layers and layers of these grasses that we can see in this area of the water. Now we'll put a little bit more of the sky color in. We'll have a little, I'm going to take the alizarin red. Remember that red is called alizarin crimson, and it really helps to make this water look deeper in this area. And so if I put that crimson in this space, you can see how much deeper that looks now than it did a few minutes ago when it didn't have the red in it. The red, the alizarin crimson, mixes beautifully with the violet color that we're using, and it also mixes great with the ultramarine blue. So that's why it blends so well and works together, because they belong to the same color family. So now that we have that many colors in, we're going to use the brush and go through and give a few more of the vertical strokes that we're adding right across those horizontal strokes, so that we give that feeling of reflection that we're building in our water. Okay, so now let's start on the grass, and we're just almost going to take the same strokes that we've been doing outside the water to start our foundation of our grass with. I didn't have to wash my brush at all. I just picked up some of the sap green that I'm going to use across the bank. Along the edge, I'm just pulling in. Now, the strokes that I'm doing now are changing a little bit because I don't want the full width of the brush necessarily, unless I turn it to the direction where I can get a thin one. But I do want to just take the blue and the green together and let it start working here as a contrast between the water and the grasses. The grasses, sap green, are really nice in this area, but I can also now, I'm picking up a little bit of the burnt umber, and that's a brown that has some black in it, so I'm darkening up that space. And I'm not making any specific lines. Everything is really broad and general, and I'm just layering the colors on top. Everything in this painting is very subtle and done very, very gently, almost, in getting the layers put together on top of each other. So after I did the sap green and added some brown, now I'm going to go and add a little bit of the yellow ochre in. So now it lightens up a little bit as it moves outward away from the water. So this is yellow ochre, and I'm turning my brush almost like a 3/4. So I'm still creating texture, which is so important to this picture. I'm making the textures come out so that it really shows it. In a picture like this, it is all grass and water, so you have to be pretty creative to get it to be a beautiful painting where people look at it and say, you know, the grass is really nice, and it looks like it is done in such a way that you can tell that the brush strokes just make the texture. And in this color, where the brown and the greens go together, you can see now as we're going off towards the left that I'm going to lighten up a little bit more. So now I'm going to add the yellow ochre in to the side and add the cad yellow to it, so we can even brighten it up just a little bit more in that particular space. So we think about these as being just patches of different colors, and using the brush in that downward direction, you can really build the grass up in a way that shows every brush stroke counts. Now, because I've added the yellow in, I'm really going to come back in and add the purple again. That's the way that you can make those colors really pop out against each other. We don't need a bright yellow, but look how beautiful it is if we take the purple and put it in there against where we've just put the yellow. And remember, we're just layering color on top of color. And to do this, we are using a very simple stroke of the brush so that these colors really show up against each other, and every little inch is useful in setting up this painting. So now as we go through and add a different base of the purple, I'm gonna add that in a little stronger way as I come in, because I'm gonna add, or a way that I can do that is to go with the purple and add the red to it. So that makes it really deeper, and you can see that that's definitely needed. We've got to separate these areas. We can't have them all the same. So that allows us to do that when we add the alizarin red in to that blue. So now you can see we've got the blues and the violets. And now in this area, I think if I picked up a little bit of orange, the complement of blue is orange. So if I pick up that color in, you can see how all of a sudden now the orange begins to pop out. And the brush stroke is the same. It's about an inch. It's coming down about an inch. And it is now getting a little bit lighter as I add the cat orange to it. And if I need to tone it down a little bit, then I can just pick up a little bit of the burnt sienna and add that in. And you can see how easily the color can change once you mix those together. So now I have a pretty good thing going with the yellows, the greens, the oranges, and now I even have the purple is coming in, and they're really showing off pretty good too. So now as I come on down into this area, I'm going to make my brush strokes a little bit longer. They're pretty short, less than an inch in here, and now I'm going to extend them a little bit. So I'm going to load my brush with the yellow, cad yellow. I'm going to add some of the sap green to it and get a nice lush green that I can start using in this area. And I'm using the same stroke, but as you can see, I'm building from far away to close up, and you can see how I let these colors just overlap one another and help each other show off, and that's definitely working in this area. The patches that I'm making of the colors, I'm making them in such a way that they almost look like puzzle pieces, and they just fit right together as I lay them one on top of the other. Okay, so I like the patch of green that I have in here, and so now I'm going to add more of the sap green. That's the base that I used to start this with a while ago, and I'm just using the sap green to anchor this area down so it won't be floating. The dark colors do that. And remember, a while ago I added the alizarin crimson in there, and that really helped. So I'll be doing that again. I'm just going to continue picking up the sap green and putting that in along the bank. And once we get enough of that area with one sap green, or one color, the sap green, then I can begin adding a little bit more of the burnt sienna to this area. I want to come on down with the browns, so I'm going to add a combination of the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna together so that I can fill up more of this space. So these are just long strokes now. They're getting a little bit longer as we move this direction so that they can look like they're closer to the viewer. So we'll add a few of those. And then I'm going back to the green again. I'm picking some of the sap green up, and I'm going to begin to go in the area against the bank and finish up with the green. And then I'll have most of the underpainting done so that we can start building a little bit more of the detail up. So you can see the colors that are mixing on my brush. Now become a part of this area because they all work together very nicely. I have a little bit more burnt sienna. This time I can add a little orange with it to brighten up this area. So now I have burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and I've added some orange. So we can do that in this area. remember, as soon as I turn my brush over, I find new colors that I was painting with before. So that's always an interesting, fun thing that you can't always predict, but it always adds a great surprise to your painting, and usually a very good surprise. So don't be afraid of colors or things happening that you didn't expect, because that's what a painting is all about. So a little bit more burnt sienna over here, and then now we're going to finish up over here with burnt sienna and yellow ochre and a little bit of the sap green. And then we will move on over to the other side of the bank. Next. So now as we begin to look, remember we're further away over here, we're further back. We're gonna have some of the same browns and greens here. I think in this area I want to lighten that up a little bit. So I'm gonna go with the traditional color, or the same color that I was using over here first with the greens. And then I'm gonna begin to lighten it up pretty quick like, because I don't have a lot of space between here and the water. So I'm gonna add yellow and a little bit of the sap green to make a green in this space. So now that green really pops out against the brown and the darker green that I had going in there a few minutes ago. And I'm still just making overlaps of color that show that you've got space and you've got different layers. Now I'll pick up a little bit more of the brown and finish up with adding the yellow. And now I'm even going to add some white to it to brighten that up just a little bit. And so now we have most of our space filled in. So now we can go back and look and see what the painting needs to enhance it. So the first thing I see is that I would like to come in here now and add some of this beautiful yellow and white that we just created here into this space just a little bit more. So now we're going to change to a nylon 3/4 inch brush. We've been using the inch brush, so now we're going to get a little bit more control with this nylon brush than we had with the bristle brush. And I'm going to start in this background space with a light green. So I'm adding yellow and the blue together. And then I'm just going to start building more layers of color in here. And so this brush allows me to do that with a little more detail than what I had with the big bristle brush. So I like the way that looks. I'm going to use that same color down in here. I added a little blue to it, to the yellow. Now I'll have a little more green. So as I come down this side, I'm going to add burnt sienna and burnt umber to darken this, but as I'm doing it, I'm adding a little bit of the alizarin crimson with it, so that way I get a great variety of browns and reds together that are really nice. Remember, we used some oranges over here, so I might add a little bit of orange in here, but with my paint being a little wet and being able to blend those colors in, it really looks nice. I'm going to go in and add definition to the bank so that I can anchor this land up underneath the grass, because it needs that dark, deep color. I'm not using a lot of detail. It's still a big stroke. The most important thing here is adding the dark color in. So I'm just laying that dark color all along the bank. Now after I go out of the water, I'm going up on both sides so I can make sure that I have that uniformity that goes through both areas. Okay, so after I use the brush for the anchoring, making the dark around, I'm going to go in now and I'm going to add just color. I'm going to start with the water. I'm going to rinse the brush out and then I'm going to tap it dry so that I can make sure that I don't have too much water. And I'm going to go in and actually use a cerulean blue this time. We haven't used it in the water before, so it will bring out vibrancy that we've not added, and this is on this top layer. So it's a little bit of the cerulean blue, and you can see how different that is than the ultramarine. The ultramarine is the one that we did first, where you can, it's almost like a purpley blue color, and you can definitely see the difference between the two. But I'm going to take the cerulean and lighten it up with some white and use it over in this area too. Now I'm going to just pull some of our strokes down, just like we did with the bristle brush, except remember this brush is a lot finer because it's made with the nylon. And it can begin to create that reflective look that we want in the water by using the vertical and the horizontal strokes. You can get that weaving look that really accents that definition of reflection that we need from the land. So we have that. Now I'm going to add a little more of the cerulean with a lot of white, and I'm going right up here to the very place where the water gets started and add some of that in. And now we'll look at the grass that we need that is in the forefront, and see if we can take and add some of that blue with our yellow to make a green that would work for us. I lightened it a little bit with the white, but I wanted to come in and make some of these greens really brighter and let them stand out against the colors that are darker behind it. But they really look bright against the sap green. And we'll add a few more of those strokes around. Not too many in the back, but that's probably enough that it makes a difference. Now I'd like to come in and really put the burnt sienna in. And what I'll do with that is I'll add a little bit of the yellow ochre and just a little white because we don't want it too bright. We want a warm color, but we don't want it too bright to take away from anything. So just a little bit more of that on the top as we begin to get to a finish in place for this painting. I'd like to add a little bit more over here on this side now to balance what I just put on the other side. And you can see that it just starts all coming together when we do that with the brush that's a little bit smaller in width, and then it also is softer, and so it's very different than we had in the beginning with the bristle brush. So each brush is very important for different things, and this is a really soft brush that allows us just to come in with some detail on the brush, like even if we turn it on its side like that, so we can get a different stroke, or we can make a few of these grasses have a little bit more definition towards the front. We're not going to do that very much, but just enough to show that this grass is closer to the viewer than this grass, and this is really short. So now we've almost got this purple line that comes across here, but you can see how we've got a rhythm of that going throughout the painting. We've got this one, this one, this one. So I think I'll take and get a little bit of the sap green to finish up this one, and then I think you'll feel like that you could just walk right through this marsh because of the way we've done with those different brush strokes. So I hope you've enjoyed watching the video and looking at a marsh painting in a very simple format where you use one bristle brush that's 1 inch wide, and then a nylon brush that's 3/4, and then you have a beautiful marsh painting. So thank you for joining us today.